Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this afternoon, we have Ryan McCormack, QQQ equity ETF strategist from Invesco, to discuss what's been a pretty dramatic day in the markets. The Nasdaq-100 not escaping any of the action that we've seen this afternoon as COVID-19 concerns re-accelerate. Ryan.
Hey Jill, thanks for having me. And yeah, I think slight outperformance today on the Qs versus, let's say, the S&P 500 before I jumped on the call. But yeah, not really escaping the red. Certainly, coronavirus fears cropping up as we've seen some pretty staggering numbers in Florida and California. And beyond that, you have kind of renewed worries about tariffs being implemented. So, unfortunately, just one of those red days on the market.
All right, Ryan, if we take a look at our first chart here, this is QQQ versus SPY performance over the last week.
Yeah, over the last week, we saw QQQ outperform the S&P 500. QQQ returned 2.62% versus the S&P's 0.23%. That helped widen QQQ's year-to-date outperformance, which stands at 17.4% total return for QQQ. Versus the S&P 500 down 2.14%. So approaching that 20% disparity number, pretty staggering when you're looking at that year-to-date performance.
Yeah, the performance is quite remarkable considering our macro environment. Let's drill down even deeper and take a look at some of the individual sectors.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at the sector picture over the past, let's call it 5 weeks or so, we saw a lot of those unloved names that were on sale, kind of drive S&P outperformance. This week, it went back to kind of reverted to what we had seen previously, where QQQ's overweight sectors were the ones that drove outperformance. So consumer discretionary, information technology, communication services, all helped. The overweights to those sectors helped to drive that relative outperformance versus the S&P 500. And then also healthcare, which we've spoken about a couple of times here on the show. It's interesting when you're looking at healthcare performance of QQQ for the week, up 3.79% versus SPY, where it was only up 0.59%. Driven by some of those biotech names like BioMarin, up over 14% after some pretty encouraging data, along with Seattle Genetics up 9%. So, those are two holdings that the S&P 500 does not have. And beyond that, QQQ is much more exposed to those innovative biotech companies versus the S&P, which again is going to be more large cap pharma, medical providers. So, another good example of how, you look at kind of the differentiation of securities within QQQ, in this case, help that drive that relative outperformance.
Yeah, Ryan, and to wrap up here, we talk about the Nasdaq-100 constituents as the modern day industrials. And for further sign of the times, let's talk about DocuSign replacing United Airlines in the index. It's just another technology addition to the index. Yeah,
it's interesting. And certainly, like, this is sort of a real-time look at the 21st century industrials, right? DocuSign, it was announced late on June the 12th that it would be replacing United Airlines in the Nasdaq-100 index. United Airlines fell under 0.10% of total market cap of the index for 2 consecutive months, which triggers the deletion. So, unlike something like Tesla that we've seen garner a larger and larger weight in the index, this is an example of how sometimes if a name isn't performing, the index methodology will essentially just kick it out. So DocuSign was the replacement. The first trading session after the announcement was up over 8%. It was added officially effective June 22nd, up over 4.25% that day. And that's pretty. Obviously, it's a bump that's expected when you're getting added to such a prestigious index as Nasdaq-100. But beyond that, you look underneath and you've seen unbelievable revenue growth. You've seen unbelievable subscriber growth, all in this whole work from home environment where the digitization of the economy has moved a lot of things that traditionally were done in person, moving it more to online. So a perfect example of one of those 21st century industrials. And welcome to the Nasdaq-100 and QQQ.
All right, Ryan, great stuff as always. Thanks for joining me on Trade Talks.
Thanks very much, Jill.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq.